Good evening and welcome everyone to the international launch of Dr. Naeem Inayatullah's new book, Pedagogy as Encounter Beyond the Teaching Imperative. My name is Raza Rumi and I direct the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College. Our center examines the impact of independent media on journalism, democracy, society, and participatory cultures. The Park Center and the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival, directed by my dear colleague, Dr. Patricia Zimmerman, who's also here present, are the co-sponsors of tonight's launch. Just a bit of logistics for the event this evening. We'd kindly request you to rename yourself by adding your current location. This is very helpful for our speakers. And the format of our evening would be as follows. Dean Claire Gleitman will introduce the event, followed by Dr. Joel Dennerstein from Tulane University, who would give a very short overview of the significance of this book. And then Naeem Inayatullah will read a short excerpt from his new book. Following these preliminary remarks, Dr. Aida Hozic from the University of Florida will engage in a conversation about the book with Naeem Inayatullah for about 20 to 25 minutes. And we would like to devote the last part of our launch, this event, 15 to 20 minutes of time for your questions and your responses. We also ask you that you come on camera to ask your question rather than posting it in the chat. It is easier for the speakers to identify and also makes it more interactive. At 8 p.m., we shall host an informal after party so that you can congratulate Dr. Naeem Inayatullah and chat more. And it is my pleasure now to introduce to you Dr. Claire Gleitman, Dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences at Ithaca College. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Raza. Welcome, faculty, students, and especially our alumni and guests from across the country and the world who've joined us for this special opportunity to celebrate Naeem Inayatullah's new book, Pedagogy as Encounter Beyond the Teaching Imperative. As Raza mentioned, tonight's event is hosted by the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival and by the Park Center for Independent Media. As some of you likely already know, FLEFF and PCIM are interdisciplinary organizations that serve all of Ithaca College through innovative programming that brings people from different disciplines together in order to discuss ideas that matter. FLEFF has been in existence for 26 years, and PCIM has been around for 14. Both are housed in the Roy H. Park School, but they serve the college, the region, the nation, and the globe by providing space for urgent, timely, and engaging conversations between scholars, writers, artists, and thinkers. One component of this important work has involved celebrating new books by members of the IC faculty as a way of making visible the work our faculty do outside of the classroom and their vital contributions to the intellectual discourse in their disciplines and beyond. We all owe a huge debt of gratitude to FLEFF and PCIM for their commitment to heralding the achievements of IC's world-class faculty. Speaking of world-class faculty, it has been my enormous pleasure and honor to have worked on the same floor in Muller at Ithaca College as Naeem for the past 25 or so years. We've had many students in common, so I became very used to hearing about how Naeem rocked those students' world with his piercing intelligence and his incisive ability to challenge uncritical or static ways of thinking. Naeem is an internationally recognized scholar who has published widely on politics, global capitalism, and international relations. His new book brings together a lifetime of scholarship and a lifetime of teaching, exploring the intersections and collisions between the two, asking the question, among others, what is the role of politics in the classroom? To say more about pedagogy as encounter, I am pleased to introduce you to Dr. Joel Dinerstein, Professor of English at Tulane University.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to start with about an overview of a paragraph and then say something about the contents of the book. So pedagogy as encounter is an honest, innovative, erudite, and profoundly student-centered work. Naeem embraces the range of human behavior in the classroom, including emotions, discomfort, paradox, and even spirituality. His method rejects all kinds of political correctness in favor of the openness of each student's encounter with professor, text, and group. Now, Naeem connects the personal and political through a simple self-reflexive question. What is in this for me, the teacher? He declares the teacher an imperialist by definition and suggests that any understanding of pedagogy must begin with such an admission. He then begins by deconstructing his own learning and examples from his family. Nearly all the anecdotes are compelling, with the occasional helpful, modest admission such as, quote, "We never really know what sticks or why, do we?" It is refreshing to read such an outlandish opening as teaching is impossible, especially since he works out every angle of this generative three-word phrase. It's a good hook, and it leads to the five-word distillation of the project, a pedagogy of encounter and emergence. This is a fairly explicit repudiation of the notion of pedagogy as liberation, the default position of the humanities, in my humble opinion. The book gets at these questions in innovative ways. In form, it is anecdotal, aggregative, and reader-centered. In field, it emerges from political economy by way of collective psychology. It insists on desire-based learning, in other words, the interdependence of student and teacher needs. And there's a reward every few pages for the reader. For example, Naeem's own epiphany about the political lie that knowledge is power, which leads to his statement that the professoriate may simply be peddlers of soft power. Now, I am personally drawn to works that interrogate first principles of anything, such as, quote, the impulse to teach here, or, quote, why learn at all? And to authors, but in particular, only when authors can come up with such bold aphorisms as, quote, no one wants to learn, but everyone has an insatiable curiosity, unquote. The book is a hybrid work of memoir, essay, pedagogy, social thought, political analysis, academic theory, and class lecture that proceeds by way of anecdote. The writing itself has a frictionless flow, and Naeem has an eye and an ear for the key phrase. Here are a few. Critical love. My favorite, crushed hope as a viable resource. And then the female student who realizes she is, quote unquote, a projective device. In short, the reader should settle in for the best kind of bumpy ride, alternately challenging and illuminating. And still, regardless of your political perspective, or for that matter, your pedagogical method, pedagogy as encounter can still be read simply as a personal quest rendered as an act of witnessing. A neat trick, that. So thanks to Naeem, good luck at changing pedagogy. And now the man himself, Naeem, will read a passage from his book. Take it away, Naeem.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Claire. I'm going to read two passages. One is the first vignette, and then one from the middle of the book. I believed that teaching and learning were possible when I began my career. Nothing in my socialization suggested otherwise. Perhaps I had doubts, but I probably ignored them to fend off confusion, paralysis, and joblessness. If some part of me sensed the impossibility of my teaching, I wonder why I didn't treat my doubt as a threat, why I did treat my doubt as a threat and not also as a resource, as a gift to open. Sven Lindqvist hints at the answer in his exquisite book, Exterminate the Brutes, in which he claims progress comes at the cost of genocide. He ends with these mesmerizing lines, quote, "You already know this, so do I. It's not knowledge we lack. What's missing is the courage to understand what we know and draw conclusions," end quote. Lindqvist claims knowing requires courage, the kind of courage most of us cannot usually muster. But then, how did he face his own fear of knowing? How might we do the same? In suggesting that all we need is courage, Lindqvist inadvertently sidesteps a crucial question. Why don't we have the courage that knowing and acting require? My subject matter is not progress and genocide, but teaching and learning. In homage to Lindqvist, I could offer the corresponding lines. Teaching is impossible, learning is unlikely, encounter is the remainder. You already know this, as do I. It's not knowledge we lack. What's missing is the courage to understand and draw conclusions. Why don't we have the courage that knowing and acting require? I offer a largely confessional narrative that turns the issue of courage into a question of the gains and losses that accrue when one gives up on trying to teach and instead follows the pedagogy of encounter. I ask, if we treat teaching as if it were impossible and learning as unlikely, what can we find in the classroom? I'm not suggesting that we surrender to teaching's difficulty by renouncing our responsibility. Rather, I ask, what emerges if we vacate teaching and learning as explicit goals? The answer, it turns out, is plenty. This book describes that plenty and the processes that summon that plenty's emergence. So that's from the opening of the book. Here's something more towards the middle. Late in the semester, I confront them with their own desire. It's a crisp, sunny day, and I think, why aren't they outdoors playing? I have dashed their easy hopes for making the world a better place. I ask them to consider how our intent and our plans are offset by others working in the opposite direction. I demonstrate our necessary complicity in the very oppressions we seek to overcome. I present macro and micro structures that sustain their shapes over decades and centuries, despite our desire to have them be otherwise. The complexities of the world are so daunting and our abilities so feeble, I suggest, that we are unlikely to see the changes we seek. We cannot be sure, I conjecture, that we've even framed the problems correctly. It's not just their commitment to fair weather activism that I'm trying to undermine. Something more is at stake. What use is learning if knowledge is so insignificant, I ask. I offer myself as an example. I've studied global structural inequality for more than 3 decades, I say, and my understanding of it is far less sure than when I began. As I expose the hollowness of their bright, shiny enthusiasm, they drop from the sky like birds no longer willing to flap their wings. Those who feel beaten stopped attending. Those hanging seem to have no reason to be present. It feels like too much. We have arrived at a moment of loss. Finally, I ask, since making the world a better place seems so hopeless, why not just party? Inevitably, they laugh at my gambit, not having yet grasped my trap. Don't avoid my traps, I say. Rather, use your body to spring the trap. Why? To see what happens, of course. After all, it's only a classroom, a hypothetical, utopic, ideal space compared to the actual world. You could have enjoyed the day, so why did you come to class? There is no attendance policy, so why are you here? If the world is hopeless, we can just party. They laugh, and inevitably someone says, but we're already partying. That's what the doors are for. I don't laugh. My practiced tone is just short of somber. My pacing is deliberate. I'm riffing a ballad in the lower registers of the baritone sax. I don't press this moment. I let them linger on how their partying bores them, while my party lures them in, even on this rare, cloudless Ithaca day. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Naeem. I just want to take a moment and thank Patricia Zimmerman, Raza Rumi for organizing this event and for this absolutely wonderful, amazing production staff of FLEFF and Park School and Ithaca College, and to say hello to all of my colleagues, former colleagues at Ithaca College. So I know Naeem from the same building from Muller, from about, I don't know, 23 years ago, 22, 23 years ago when we taught together. And our offices were next door to each other. And like Claire, I know students who were avoiding Naeem's classes, and I also know students who would follow Naeem, not just through 5 or 6 classes that they could take with him, but for life, because of what happened in these classrooms. So I think what we will try to do in the next 20, 25, 30 minutes in conversation is to try to unpack some of the key concepts in the book, I think, then talk a little bit about the practices, what happens in this Naeem classroom, known as Naeem's classroom. And then we'll kind of discuss a couple of key takeaways, I think, from the book. And then, as Raza already indicated, there would be about 15 minutes for questions from the audience, and I'm really looking forward to those questions. And I hope that our conversations will, the key intent is really to let you into that conversation. So no matter how intense we are right now, I hope you will join us later. So Naeem, thanks again. Thanks for the reading. Thanks to Joel for a great introduction of the book. And so maybe you can tell us just a little bit more about this whole idea of impossibility of teaching. I mean, we all, those of us who practice it, we take it for granted that we are there to teach others something that we know. But you kind of inverse that relationship and you don't take it for granted. And it seems that students are really need to develop this courage to know what they already know. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Kind of what's teaching, what's learning, how do they relate to each other?
Yeah, this is actually one of your most difficult questions. We've exchanged the questions a little bit, so I've had a little bit of a chance to think about it. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that there's no learning going on, but it's also not ridiculous. So I divide learning up into 3 kinds of categories. We can learn about things. We can learn about how many moons Saturn has. We can learn about capitalism's origins and history. We can learn about molecules. So those are easy things to learn, but they're things. We can also learn rules or structures. Why do elements of a molecule interact? How do they interact? What is the relationship between gravity, mass, light, energy? What are the rules of capitalism? So those are a little bit more difficult to learn, but still learnable, it seems to me. But the deepest assumptions are the ones I claim are really not possible to learn. And these are the assumptions that hold our world together and that we're not really conscious of. And that if we expose those assumptions to the light of day, we might lose our friends, we might lose our family members, we might lose our orientation toward the world. And so there's a way that there's a pressure on us not even to want to know what those assumptions are. And at this deepest level, I think that, yeah, it's a good idea to assume that learning is impossible, that students, faculty for that matter, don't actually want to know these deepest causes of their own being. Does that give you a sense of it, what I have in mind?
A little bit. There's one class that I teach, which actually, once again, was inspired very much by our conversations a long time ago. It's in culture and world politics. And in that class, in the syllabus, I think I tell students that they will be unlearning more than they will be learning. So does that unlearning also resonate to some degree? Is that a part of pedagogical practice to kind of push students to unlearn things that they already know?
Yeah. Unlearning, I've seen the unlearning. That seems to me possible. But the more you push on the unlearning, the deeper you go with it, at some point we reach a level where the protective psychology of the human being takes over and says, we can push this far, but no further than this, please. And it's not really a please. It's more of an announcement. We can push this far and that's it. Right? And when we reach that moment, the students might leave the room. They might drop the course. They might stop speaking to us altogether.
Or they might leave for a while and then return. I mean, that
also happens. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are two concepts, and this was not in the script, but it's something that actually Joel was mentioning. It was hidden text in what he was saying. There are two concepts which really organize the book kind of dialectically, I think, and that's fear and desire. There's a fear of learning. There's a desire and curiosity on the other end. So again, how do you see this relationship, and what do these two concepts again mean for you?
Yeah. This is a question that wasn't on the script, Aida.
No, that was intentional.
You're trying to catch me here. Good job. Yeah, fear and desire. Yeah. To think on my feet here for a second. So the way that I approach office hours or a conversation or being in the classroom is that these are the two forces at work. On the one hand, a great fear of learning the deepest parts of one's own world, one's own psychological structures, the structures of the global world. And on the other hand, an insatiable curiosity. So these, to me, are two equal opposite forces. And so the play that I'm kind of keen to develop in the space of office hours or in the space of a classroom is to see how these two forces work themselves out within our conversation, within the conversation that the student is having with herself, himself. And one of the things I'm trying to learn is, what obstacles do we give ourselves to make sure that our curiosity does not unfold? Yeah. So on the one hand, tremendous energy devoted to making sure that there are obstacles to our curiosity. On the other hand, that curiosity is the driving force, probably of every human being. How does that play out? What's our role in seeing that happen? What do we do when we notice it? These are the kinds of things that started to fascinate me really kind of later in my career. Once I gave up on teaching, this is what I really started to focus in on instead.
But these are also the forces that, knowing your other work, I think, are the forces, key forces in global politics. And so that's the link somewhere. And again, Joel already hinted at that you kind of make this connection between teaching and missionary zeal and teaching as an imperial practice. And then we also live in this world, which is really now even more so openly than ever before, perhaps, the world of great powers in conflict and great imperial kind of greed. And we sit in the middle, so that we are in the belly of the beast. So how that, once again, kind of what's the relationship then between the classroom and these structures of politics?
I talk about this in the book, but I'm happy to talk about it here with you as well. The big project, the international relations theoretical project that I've been working on for decades is how do we understand colonial imperial power? What are the stories the Dutch, the British, the French, the Europeans are telling, the Spaniards, what stories are they telling themselves in order to be able to live themselves as they conquered the world and colonize the world? And so I became fascinated with searching out how they explain and justify their actions to themselves. sort of like putting the imperialists on the psychoanalytic couch and asking them, okay, so you're doing all this stuff that obviously the natives don't like. Well, how do you see this? How do you justify this to yourself? And the answer that I came up with, I think I'm not the only one. Lots of people have come up with this, that the way to justify colonialism and imperialism is to see it as a pedagogical project, as a teaching project. So the imperialist, the colonialist, the one with the superior knowledge, presumed, of course, is really doing something that's a public good, taking other parts of the world, making them part of the human family, but educating, bringing them up to par, bringing them up to the level of knowledge of the Europeans. And so it became pretty obvious to me that one of the key elements of colonialism and imperialism is this pedagogical project. And at that point, I had put myself in a very difficult bind, because it became very clear to me that I was doing the same thing in the classroom, or that structurally my role was similar. So that's when things started to unravel for me as a traditional teacher. And I had to sort of confront what my role was in the classroom. Was it any different than the pedagogical projects the colonialists and the imperialists were up to?
So how do you disinvest from that?
Yeah. Well, in some ways,
You just stop there. It can just be the love, but I think for so many people, it is a big step to come even to that thought that what they're doing in the classroom may actually be in some ways similar to this imperial mission. But then even if they realize, like, is it possible really to get out of that?
Yeah, the key sort of insight for me was that whereas the colonialists and the imperialists think of themselves as offering this pedagogical project, there's something else is at work besides the pedagogical imperative. It's what I would call an intrinsic or natural curiosity. Yeah, that they think that they are trying to educate the rest of the world, but they're actually looking for a good meal or some good music, or to learn something about the world. So even behind the pedagogical project of the imperialists and the colonialists is a desire to know the world, to understand the world. And then if that's what the pedagogical project is really all about, then it becomes a lot easier for me to be inside the classroom, where I can think to myself, I think my job is to teach, to imperialize, to colonialize, but really behind that is the real job, which is to know the world, to know these students, to know the world through these students. That's really what I'm doing as an imperialist, because this is what the imperialist is really doing in the world.
So turning fear into a transparent desire, and switching from teaching to learning?
Yes.
Or reversing roles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If we kind of give up on the drama of I'm supposed to teach, they're supposed to learn, and go deeper into the metaphysics of this and recognize a desire to learn on the part of the teacher, then we can walk into the classroom and say, okay, what I'm really here for is to know, to learn. And what these students are going to do is to show me what the world looks like. And in the process, they might also get to the basis of their own desire. But the key to me is first of all, the desire of the professor. The desire of the professor is the climate system of the classroom, and it shapes everything. The climate, the desire is the climate in the classroom. The desire of the professor is the climate of the classroom. That climate shapes everything. And the students, by osmosis, almost bodily, whatever else charade is going on, what their bodies are actually attuning to is, how does the professor's desire express itself inside the classroom? In fact, this is what I think when I look back at my professors and my engagement with them and my love for them, I think what I see from this vantage point of today is that what I was curious about was, how did they engage their own curiosity about the world? That's what looking back at my experience with my professors, that is what I was really looking for. I didn't have the language at that point. But, you can learn these things and forget these things, the elements, the rules, mass, gravity, moonset. But what's really happening is body to body. And then the body to body relationship, it's the student, me as a student looking at my professors, what I'm noticing, I think, is how do they present their body as something that desires to know? Yeah. How do they engage that? How can I learn something from their desire to know? How can I engage the way that they engage? That's a long answer. We're supposed to keep our answers short.
No, but this is a lovely answer, and it also kind of allows me to sidestep one of the questions later about the professors. Though we'll see. Maybe I'll return to that. But I will talk about. There's one figure who kind of hovers over the text and hovers over your life, and you kind of use the word and the concept of the Great Inquisitor. That many of us walk into the classroom with this Great Inquisitor over our shoulders, thinking that we are supposed to do certain things in the class.
Yeah.
And that these expectations really cannot be betrayed. Okay, so that we need to lecture, that we need to, explain students about world affairs, that we need to teach them how states interact with each other, what's Cold War, what's hot war. So, and that depends on the discipline, but do you have any suggestions, or can you tell anecdotally how you got rid of the Great Inquisitor in the classroom?
Yeah, the Great Inquisitor is a shorthand for the internal censorship that we perform. Our syllabi are supposed to reflect the state of the art of the discipline. We are supposed to teach them X, Y, and Z because the next course is built on our course. So there's a whole set of expectations as a young professor that you internalize as a graduate student and then as a junior faculty member. And you internalize that as a kind of censorship instead of being alive and present with the students, learning their names, understanding their biographies, being with them a lot, moment to moment. What we're doing instead is we're projecting what we're supposed to be what we're supposed to teach them. And that is a result of internalizing. This is the Great Inquisitor. And for me, what happened was that, but very slowly, step by step, I started to take risks. And every time I took a risk, I looked at the door. I thought somebody's going to bust in and say, "You're busted. We're taking away your license to teach. You're out of here." And year by year by year, it did not happen. And so that allowed me to start taking more and more risks. And I don't know, I've kind of gotten lost in your question, making you can reshape it again so that I'm back on track.
No, that's it. I'm mostly thinking I know that there are junior faculty here, there are younger professors here, and I know that they feel that burden of expectations that, their evaluations will be counted, that the, students will go to another class and they will show there that they were in their class and not having learned, how states interact with each other. And so yeah, I was just curious if you have anything else to add to them to ease that burden.
I'll say two things about the Great Inquisitor. On the one hand, look at what if you read the book, you'll see the things that I've gotten away with. I'm amazed myself at the risks that I've taken and the things that I've gotten away. Nobody's busted me so far. I'm still waiting. I'm still looking at the door.
Claire is here, so.
Exactly. On the other hand, if you look at what the state of Colorado did toward Churchill, there is a reason to have this fear. He's the professor who was basically, his license was taken away altogether. So there is a bigger state out there looking at you, making sure that you follow certain rules. But, most of us are pretty insignificant compared to somebody who's taken the kind of bold risks that War Churchill has taken. So it's not that the Great Inquisitor is a fiction. It really is out there, but it thwarts our creativity in a way that I think we don't really understand when we're junior faculty.
Mm-hmm. So can you give to those who have never been in a Naeem's classroom, can you give them a little taste of that classroom? What does the classroom look like? What happens? What does this non-teaching look like? It's not lecturing, but what is it?
Well, I've come to think of it as a Socratic interrogation. Yeah, we sit in a circle. I walk around on the outside of the circle. We've agreed to a reading. There's no lecture, and I ask how many people had an opportunity to do the reading, and then I assess the situation, and the floor is open. And if the conversation is bad, then we have a bad conversation. We if the conversation is mediocre, we have a mediocre conversation. If they have troubles articulating what they're trying to say, it is my job to get them to actually get them to say what they want to say.
Mhm.
And so as they learn how to be free about what they might say in my classroom, then my job becomes to try and create tensions within the space. I try to take their comments and pit them against each other, the comments, and sometimes even the persons, and to sustain a kind of a tension and almost conflict within the space. And all this is done in a way without really having a sense of where we're going. All we're doing at that point is just making sure that people are speaking, that those speaking are saying what they really want to say, and that there is enough tension in the space so that there's, kind of a riveting sense. They are paying attention to what's going on, and they may even get headaches. So the whole, I'm sort of improvising here, but the idea is to create enough tension in the space within their own words, whatever emerges from those conversations, to create something that they leave the room thinking about. So that's sort of what happens in the classroom.
Okay. At one point you say in the book that if you had started all over again, you would have taught from novels only. And you also, I know, teach about music. And so what's the role of the arts? What's the role of novels? What's the role of music in the classroom?
Yeah. That's, I'm happy to answer that one. If you try and start a political conversation in a classroom, you're likely not to succeed. But if you open a conversation with whether a film was any good, whether a piece of music is worthwhile, whether a show that you saw last night was garbage or not, everybody's ready to jump in. The arts have a way of opening up space that leads indirectly to politics. So the kind of the tension producing capability of art, novels, films, movies, music is staggeringly more, is far easier to sort of start with art and then go directly into politics, because everybody seems to have an opinion about art which they're willing to share, whereas they might keep their cards pretty close to themselves when it comes to politics directly.
Can you give us an example of some things that you learned from your students?
So almost every answer to the questions that you sent me has this short response as far as I'm concerned. Read the book.
But for those who haven't, what would incite them?
No, I know. I was going to follow up after I stopped laughing a little bit. Well, the book is a series of vignettes about what I have learned from students in some ways. One of my friends, Laurie Leonard, said that the book is a love letter to my students, and that captures some of it. But to answer your question more abstractly and directly, I would say that the key is my assumption that the macro world and the micro world are actually one and in the same world. Mm-hmm. So each student is a macro instantiation of the world at large. So if I can get that student to spill their autobiography to me, they become a window to the world for me. So what each student teaches me is their context, their biography, their values. And from looking at the world through their eyes, I actually am doing a lot of anthropological traveling. Mm-hmm. They actually show me the world. This is maybe the least expensive way to see the world.
Patty has just warned me that we have 2 or 3 minutes left, so I will ask the
Has it gone by that quickly?
It's
My
gone by
God.
very quickly, which is very good. I'll ask the last question, which is now, so don't tell me read the book. So, so let's say someone reads the book. What do you want them to remember afterwards? In a similar way, in which is when you said you want students to leave and think about something. So what do you want people to think about when they read the book?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal of the book is to say, hey, look, can you really believe the shit that I got away with in this book? Okay, so you're not as risk prone as I am, fair enough. But it's possible to take more risks in the classroom. It's possible to get beyond the drama and the charade of teaching projects. We can actually be with each other as human beings while also exploring deep theoretical concepts. So sure, don't take as many risks as I did. You know, maybe you'd still be at a Research One Institute if you didn't take these kinds of risks, who knows? But look, there's a lot of things you can still do if you treat the classroom space as a living space, as a space resonant with desire on the part of the students. So, you know, like take half a step in that direction. I think that's what I want to leave people with is there's a lot more openness and creativity in the classroom space than we might imagine.
So there's a different horizon of possibilities out there than the one we usually think of.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a world of openness, a world of creativity in the cramped room that is called the classroom. It's not nearly as cramped as we might imagine. It's actually a window to the world.
Thank you, Naeem. I think that's a wonderful closing. So let's start with some questions from the audience. I know that there are former students of Naeem here. It would be wonderful if you would chime in, ask questions, share very brief anecdotes of your encounters with Naeem. Just raise your hands and I'll try to find you. I'm scanning the participants for raised hands.
Should I go then?
Yes.
Hi, Manu. It's so good to see you.
Hi, Naeem. Delighted to see you and hear you. 2 questions. Well, I didn't have the chance to read the book yet, so I apologize for this, but I have been following through Paulinho and also close to you too, some of your thoughts related to pedagogy. So my first question is starting with this vision of the teacher as an imperialist. I would like to provoke you. What would be your definition of imperial overstretch in the classroom?
Imperial overstretch?
Overstretch, yes. And the second question is, as Joe expressed himself in when presenting your book, the book is a representation of, a culmination of a life journey, right? So, I'm sure you have witnessed a lot of historical transformations running through the classroom too, right? So my question would be, if you feel, or how do you see the transformations of the raw material or the attachments of the hopes you've crushed during this time? If they changed a lot, how? So I would like to hear your thoughts on this. Is that clear, the second one?
Well, how students have changed over the decades?
How has the raw material or the attachment of the students to their hopes, the ones you crushed? So how have these the reading that you have of their attachment and the raw material of their hopes changed throughout time?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand either question. Tell me what you mean by imperial overstretch.
Is there, if every teacher has this disposition of as an imperial disposition towards the classroom, and this is unavoidable, as you claim. So what would be the limits in this exercise of imperialism in your view? So the first one would be that imperial overstretch as a limit that kind of results ultimately in reversing the game and feeling somehow also constrained by its own imperialism.
Yes.
The second one is related
Okay.
to the crush, the hopes. I mean, you crush, right? I mean, and how, if you feel that throughout time, the attachment of the students to their hopes, the ones you've crushed, is somehow different.
Yeah. Let me take a shot at this crushed hopes one. Yeah. Okay. I'll select that one of the two that you gave me. What I want to believe is that if you crush the hopes of the students for an easy way to change the world, that what happens is that they begin to excavate the problem more seriously. And so if I use the metaphor of a mountain, what they want to do is get to the top of the mountain. And what I want them to do instead, if I crush their hopes, is I want them instead to think about how large Mount Everest really is. Yeah? Spend much more time on the questions than on the solutions is why I'm trying to crush their hopes. And what I found over the years is those who kind of stick to the idea that, yes, this might be an important venture, actually do begin to excavate the mountain much more, circulate around the mountain much more, and figure out what the deeper questions are. That is what I'd like to believe happens.
Thank you. Let's try to be brief in our questions because we have a lot of hands up. Rachel, did you want to say something?
Someone else could go first. There's a bit of a line, so.
Okay. So I think I have Rafael first in line on my screen. Please go ahead, Rafael.
Hello,
And just
can you
be
hear me?
brief so that we can have a number of questions come in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm not sure if my camera is on or not, but sorry. So I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Brasilia, and I'm currently in Syracuse, teaching at Lemoyne as I'm teaching 2 classes as structure of record. And I kind of wanted to ask about, especially like when you have a difference, like in a class with a lot of non-majors, how you deal with participation when they're not too comfortable with poli-sci coursework in general. And especially also how you deal with maybe more touchy issues. I'm a US citizen. I was raised here, but I've always been a little bit uncomfortable as an immigrant in making certain criticisms of the US. So I'm teaching, for example, US foreign policy. And I've felt a little bit uncomfortable at times in dealing with certain critiques of US foreign policy in a US audience. And I wanted to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment and the question, Raphael. Raphael, I feel inadequate to be able to answer your question. I'm far less concerned about teaching techniques, and I'm more fascinated by sort of the meta questions, the philosophical questions. So I'm not really sure how to answer your question. So sometimes I don't answer questions. So maybe I'll just let that one go, unless you can make it precise.
I can try to make it more precise. Maybe that philosophical question about even looking at the teacher as the imperialist, but the teacher that has felt as the colonized, and how to deal with that colonized identity within an imperialist context of the United States.
Yeah, but in that it puts you in a perfect position, because you as a teacher are the imperialist, but you're from Brazil as having been from a colonized space. So therefore you're both, and you're perfectly capable of traveling back and forth between those two positions. That would be that's a pretty nice passport.
Let me move to Jennifer. Jennifer.
Hi, Naeem. Thank you. I can't wait to read this. I'm really excited. And I want to talk to you a lot more about it. But just one question for right now. As someone who teaches Latin American art, I'm constantly talking about these kinds of issues with my students. I'm talking about the role of education and imperialism, and I'm very much asking these kind of questions of myself too. I feel like I've also sort of backed myself into a box and I'm trying to grapple with it. And so I'm really interested in thinking through the implications of how you're talking about this. And one thing, so it's interesting, you've posited as a solution this idea of creating the feel of the classroom through your curiosity and inspiring your students in a sense to emulate that. And as I'm thinking about that very practice of emulation, that seems to me still straight in the heart of liberal classical thought, that emulation is a way to self-elevate. And so I'm wondering how that's not imperialist.
Yeah, I get nice, good. I'm squirming here. I'm not trying to get them to emulate anything that I'm doing. It would be my first and immediate reaction. I'm trying, except for perhaps to the degree that I'm trying to show them my own curiosity. If that gets them to explore their own curiosity, that's a kind of emulation that I can live with. That kind of imperialism might be okay. I don't know. I have to think about it more, Jennifer. We could talk about this.
Okay. Let me, Julio, just be very brief. Knowing you, I can actually demand this. So just one question, one shot.
Oh, you're brief? No way. That's not going to happen.
He has to be. That's my pedagogical imperative now.
Yes. Nice to hear you both. It's really nice to hear your voices again. So anyway, the first question is about what do you make of your own power? I think the public of your book is already a lot of powerful people who can claim to teach, right? And the second question, which is related to that, and about difference, and your other book that I love, it's about not all imperialists were the same, right? A lot of imperialists were anti-imperialists, or they were living out of the privileges, but they were fighting really hard. So what are those moments when the teachers actually taught something and it's just impressive? Because like I can remember people who struggle a lot, but I'm just gonna give up even my titles. I don't care about what is gonna be left. And so I'm thinking about, have you seen any glimpse of teaching lessons?
Okay.
What was that question? Have I seen any glimpse of teaching that was what?
That's it. Because of your statement, I think that's okay.
Have I seen any glimpse of teaching anywhere that was worthwhile? Is that the question?
No, the question is more general, right? So like if your statement is teaching is impossible, then have you seen something that comes close to teaching in your general reasoning?
No, I will stick with my claim. I think teaching is impossible. You cannot get other people to do what you want them to do without, I mean, the ultimate position is that they voluntarily do something because that's what they want to do. If I can get you to do that, I don't know if that counts as teaching. That might just be a relationship. This is very similar. My interpretation of this is very similar to Jennifer's question. Julio, okay. I feel a lot of pressure to do this quickly. I'm sorry.
Yes, you have to. Okay. Let me move. Harriet, please. Yes, you can go ahead. Just unmute yourself and just.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, hi, Naeem.
Hi, Harriet.
Congratulations on this book. And I do want to say that even though we were in different departments, you always made the sunshine for me at Ithaca College.
So kind of you to say.
And there are some students, you know who you are, who I could just squeeze your faces if I wouldn't be sued for it. But especially a lot of those students who were in Students for Justice in Palestine, it's just so lovely to see you. And others, I see you waving. I wanted to ask two quick things. One is I was wondering where Frary might fit into all of this.
Yeah.
Because he used to be a household word years ago, and I never hear anybody mention him anymore, really.
Yeah.
And he never struck me as particularly imperialist in his pedagogy. And then the other thing I was just going to ask is, are there any vignettes or scenarios you could give us that will illustrate some of what you're talking about?
Some of what I'm talking about. Like
yeah, like slices of life from your classes.
So the answer to the second question is, Harriet, read the book.
Okay.
But I'll take one of your two questions. Frary looms large in this book, and for me as a human being. And Frary saved my ass many times when I was a young teacher. I read his work quite a bit. But then when I had a sabbatical some years back, I reread Frary just to freshen up a little bit, and I found myself unable to take him seriously. And then the same is true for my reading of bell hooks. And I try to locate what it was that I rejected in both their thinkings, and it's the concept of liberation. I just no longer believe in liberation. I believe in curiosity, I believe in learning, but I don't believe in liberation. And so once I gave up on the idea of liberation, I had to let go of Frary altogether.
Okay. So the last question goes to Jesse. Wonderful to see you, by the way. Unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And pardon me. It's
Hi, brother Jesse. How are you?
2 a.m. here in Europe. So
that's dedication.
Pardon my bleary eyes. It strikes me that the ego is a necessary fiction, like political identity. And it is structured like political identity. It's structured in and through narratives. And you enjoy shattering those. I've seen it. I've suffered it. I've helped pick up the pieces. But ultimately, isn't that the role of the shaman or the psychoanalyst more than the university instructor? And in that sense, I ask you this as now someone who is also a university instructor, having followed my mentor, Naeem. What are the strategies or the limits of the strategies we owe them for that reconstruction? So if we shatter the necessary fictions, what are the strategies for that repair work?
Yeah. This is a good one, Jesse.
You can use this name since this can be the wrap up. Jesse is giving you a kind of a cue to wrap up as well.
Okay. The natural answer is we have a responsibility to pick up the pieces once we break them. I don't believe that, because that is a patronizing attitude. They can pick up the pieces themselves. We have to have enough faith and confidence in our fellow human beings so that if we break their egos, that we are willing to let them heal themselves. Yeah. So yes, I'm there for them as a human being, but I am not there as a psychoanalyst or as a shaman to help put them back together. That is their job.
So I will end this. I want to thank everybody, and I want to apologize to those of you who didn't get to ask the questions, but maybe you can, sort of find a way to reach out to Naeem later. I will end with something that I shared with Naeem. He has forgotten. This was the mantra that he shared with me when I was teaching at Ithaca College, and I was not a very good teacher. So he came to my classroom to visit, and he walked out of it and said, you're pushing your students to jump, but you also have to show them that you will be there to kind of pick them up when they fall. This is slightly different than what you just said. But it also does not mean, you didn't say I need to pick them up and put them together when they fall down. But I think there's also this obligation of the teacher on some level, that even if you are causing tensions and in introducing this discomfort, that you are also still there somewhere as their defense from the world. At least that's what I understood. So anyway, I want to encourage everybody to read the book, these beautiful 120 vignettes, and for us all to continue to create the archive of Naeem teaching. Thank you.
And thank you, Aida and Naeem. I'd like to thank all of our participants for joining us tonight from New York City, New Jersey, Colorado, Washington, Virginia, Illinois, Maine, Louisiana, Vermont, Chicago, Syracuse, Boston, and Ithaca, and from Wales, the Netherlands, France, Colombia, Brazil, India, and Nigeria. I'd like to ask everybody now to join me in putting your cameras on, unmuting, and I'd like everyone to give a big round of applause to Aida Hojic and Naeem Inayatullah for an absolutely wonderful evening. And I'd like to invite everyone who wants to continue the conversation to hang on for our after hours, which is more informal. So now please unmute and put your cameras on and let's all clap. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.